"If you play that concerto blindfolded," sneered Charles Whitmore III, his voice slicing through the gala like a blade, "I'll give you my entire fortune. And my son will marry you on the spot." The room froze. 300 guests stared in. Stunned silence. This wasn't a joke. It was a public execution, not of the body, but of dignity. The woman didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She simply looked up, her dark eyes locking onto his with a calm that sent a chill down the spine of every soul in that room. Because what Charles Whitmore didn't know was that he had just challenged a ghost from the past, won the world. Thought was dead. The Whitmore Tower grand opening was Manhattan's most exclusive event of the year. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen stars. Champagne flowed like rivers. The elite of finance, politics, and high society mingled beneath gold-trimmed arches, whispering about deals worth billions. At the center stood Charles Whitmore III, billionaire, philanthropist, and undisputed king of New York's old money. Beside him, his wife Eleanor, a former opera singer who now taught culture to debutantes. And his son, Daniel Whitmore, 29, quiet, thoughtful, always watching the staff a little too closely. Then there was Amara Diallo, 36, a contract cleaner hired for the night. She moved silently, efficiently, in a simple gray uniform. No one noticed her. No one remembered her name. But for the past 4 weeks, she had watched them all, their laughter, their cruelty, their fragile empires built on arrogance. And tonight, something in her stirred. It started with a spilled glass. A guest bumped into Amara. Red wine splashed across the white marble. She dropped to her knees instantly, grabbing a cloth, but Charles saw it. And in that moment, his ego demanded blood. "Ah, look at this," he announced, raising his glass like a judge. "Is this how we serve at a Whitmore event, with clumsiness?" Laughter erupted. Some guests covered their mouths, not in sympathy, but in delight. Daniel stepped forward. "Dad, it was an accident. Let it go." Charles didn't even glance at him. "No, let's make it entertaining." Amara kept cleaning, her hands steady, her face unreadable. But inside, memories flickered. Stages, spotlights, standing ovations. A life erased. A name forgotten. "Dad, this is humiliating," Daniel said, voice low but firm. "She's just trying to do her job." Charles smirked. "And you're too soft. That's why you'll never run this company." He turned back to Amara. "You heard me. Play the concerto. Blindfolded. If you don't fumble a single note, I'll marry my son to you." More laughter. A few guests pulled out their phones, already recording. Daniel's face darkened. He knew his father's games. He also knew the look in Amara's eyes, not fear, not anger, recognition, like she'd faced monsters before and survived. "I accept," Amara said. Clear, strong, cutting through the noise. The room went silent. Charles blinked. "You what?" "I said," she stood slowly, "I accept your challenge. But when I play better than your wife ever could, you'll keep your word. Publicly." Eleanor scoffed. "I performed at Carnegie Hall. You think you can touch that?" "I don't think," Amara replied. "I know." Charles laughed. "Oh, this is gold. Daniel, get your camera. I want the world to see this." Daniel hesitated. "Dad, this is wrong." "Do it," Charles snapped. "Or I'll make sure your fiancé never works in this city again." Amara didn't react to the threat. She simply smoothed her uniform and walked to the grand piano at the far end of the ballroom. No one noticed the way her fingers hovered, not nervous, but remembering. No one saw the older black man in a security uniform, watching her from the corner. His name was Julian, head of building security. 20 years on the job. But 20 years ago, he'd been at Lincoln Center, and he'd seen her play. He'd seen the world stop. Now as Amara sat at the piano, Julian pulled out his phone, not to record the joke, but to record history. 15 years ago, Amara Diallo wasn't a cleaner. She was the Amara Diallo, child prodigy, youngest soloist ever. At the New York Philharmonic. At 18, she played for presidents. At 25, she headlined a global tour. Critics called her the future of classical music. Then came the accident. A car crash on icy roads, 7 months in a coma. Doctors said she'd never play again. The nerves in her right hand were damaged, permanent. She vanished. No interviews. No memoirs, just silence. But what they didn't know. She had played, every night, in a tiny apartment. With painkillers and sheer will. She rebuilt her technique, slower, deeper, more soulful. But she never returned. Because the world only celebrates perfection, and she was no longer perfect. Just unbreakable. Blindfold her, Charles ordered. A guest handed over a silk scarf. Amara didn't resist. She tied it herself. "Let's make it interesting," Charles said. $1,000 to anyone who bets she can't finish. $5,000 if she stops mid-song. Guests laughed, placing bets like it was a circus. Daniel stood frozen. Camera in hand, shame burning in his chest. Julian watched, phone recording. Then Charles leaned in. "And if you fail? You'll clean this entire room, on your knees, for the next month." Amara didn't move. But under the blindfold, her lips curled, not in fear. In anticipation, the room buzzed. $1,000 on the cleaner quitting. She won't even find the keys. Charles raised his glass. To humility. The pianist from the orchestra approached. "What piece, ma'am?" Amara whispered one word. "Rachmaninoff." Gasps. "That concerto took years to master." "She's insane," someone muttered. The first note rang out. Clear. Perfect. Room stilled. But it was the second note that made the pianist step back in shock, because it wasn't just correct. It was haunting. Like the soul of music itself had returned. Julian's hands trembled. He'd heard that phrasing before. 15 years ago, at Lincoln Center. Same tempo, same breath between phrases. Same Amara. He zoomed in, and then she played the run. A sequence so difficult, only 3 people in the world could do it. She did it blindfolded. Julian whispered into his radio, "Call the media." Now, on stage, Amara flowed through the concerto like water. Every note a rebirth. Every chord a defiance. The audience didn't clap. They froze. Even Charles looked uneasy. Eleanor's face had gone pale. Daniel stopped recording. He wasn't capturing a joke. He was witnessing a resurrection. After the final note, silence. Then one clap. Then another. Then the entire room rose. Not in mockery, in awe. Julian stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice thick. "This woman isn't just a cleaner." He played the recording of Charles's bet. Then he said, "This is Amara Diallo, former principal soloist of the New York Philharmonic. Believed dead. Never gone." The name echoed. Charles backed away. "You can't be serious." But the truth was in the music. And music doesn't lie. The aftermath was swift. Charles demanded the video deleted. Julian refused. Within hours, #Whitmore humiliated Amara Diall trended worldwide. Sponsors dropped Whitmore Holdings. The board called for Charles's resignation. Daniel released a statement. "My father lost his way. I won't." He visited Amara. "I'm sorry," he said. "For all of it." She smiled. "You were the only one who saw me." 6 months later, the Amara Diallo Music Academy opened in Harlem, funded by global donations. Free lessons, open to all. Charles? Last seen managing a parking garage in Jersey. Broken. Forgotten. Eleanor divorced him. Daniel joined Amara's board, not as a savior, as a student. And every evening, as the sun set over the city, Amara would sit at her piano. Not for fame, not for revenge, but because music was her truth. And no man, no money, no lie could ever silence it again. Sometimes, the most powerful people aren't the ones with money. They're the ones who've lost everything, and still choose to rise. Amara didn't win because she played better. She won because she refused to be erased. So ask yourself, have you ever been judged by your job, your skin, your past? Have you ever been told you're not enough by someone who didn't know your story? Drop your truth in the comments. And if this story moved you, subscribe. Because the world needs more stories where dignity wins. And the quiet ones finally get to speak.